What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to another build video for ESO. So today we're starting with our Templar healer because I finally got it geared and I did a little bit of testing to see how it would perform in trials and stuff, and it did pretty well. So yeah, as always, if you have watched my previous build videos, what I go over is the gear, champion points, skills, and food, mundus stone, everything that's important. So before I start, I just want to say, if you found something better, definitely let me know what you use, because I am always interested in hearing what people use. But this is what works for me in veteran content, all veteran dungeons, all veteran trials, and hard mode as well. So this is what I use. Let's start off with the basics. I personally have 40 magic, 24 into health. I am planning on lowering it a little bit as I get better, but this current setup works for all hard mode trials. So my goal was to stay above 19,000 health, but as I'm still learning the new Cloud Rest on +1 to +3, I want to be a little bit careful, because if the healer dies, it's usually a wipe. So usually you want to stay a little bit above what the DPS would have, just because healing is important. In terms of mundus stone, I do use the Atronox for extra magic recovery, and it scales well with the divines pieces. In terms of food, I used either the witch mothers or the clockwork citrus fillet. I am currently out of it right now, but it's basically a better version of the witch mothers, and I really only use this when I'm in trials. But if I'm just like out in the world exploring, doing whatever, witch mothers is better to use just because it's cheaper. So clockwork gold food only in trials or difficult content. Everything else is witch mothers. So with that said, let's get into the gear right now. I do use an add-on called Superstar. I'll show it to you guys later. It basically outlines everything. I'll show it at the end. But the gear I have is 5 Yorvolds, 2 Earth Gore, 3 Olorim rings, 1 staff. As of right now, the staves, or like the weapons that would be considered a one-handed before, are now 2. So like staves count as 2 pieces, and a Maelstrom lightning staff. The reason why I'm using a Maelstrom lightning staff instead of another Olorim lightning is because I don't have one. So yeah, that's basically it. So staves count as 2 pieces now, and the effect for Olorim is basically like a better version of spell power here, so that's replaced. And the reason why we use this one, so if you look at the tooltip right now, hold on, let me just take off, let me see if I have another one. So right now, as you guys can see, there's 42 seconds, and it's because we have it combined with Yorvolds. So if we take off a piece of this one, it should say 30 seconds. So what Yorvolds does is increase your duration for all major and minor buffs by 40%. So by default, this would be 30 seconds, but if you have all 5 of them, 40% would add another 12 seconds. So that's why we have this, and it works really well together. So how you set this up, you're really going to want to have like either 5 Yorvolds on body, or 5 Olorim's body, and then staves for Yorvolds. So this is not the only setup I have. We switch it out based on the situation, but this is just kind of how I have my combination set up. And yeah, so personally, it would probably be a little bit easier for less experienced players to farm Yorvold's weapons from Scale Caller Peak. You could do it on normal and then just upgrade it. What I did was farm Cloud Rest with +3 to get purple gear. Unfortunately, I'm still working on progressing through veteran, through the +1, +2, +3 ones, so I don't have any gold jewelry, but honestly, you can just upgrade the jewelry whenever. It is expensive, but purple is good for now. What I use is 1 spell damage and 2 recovery. I personally found that to be good enough for long fights in veteran hard mode trials. So with 2,700 recovery or 2,500 on back bar, usually that's good enough for about like, I don't know, usually I just never had any magic problems at all. Though you will be spell potting the entire time and then hitting orbs and synergies from the other healer. So that's why I had that one. If I could get a back bar Olorim Lightning, I would use it in replace of the Maelstrom Lightning, but ultimately the difference was be when you actually cast the ability, so it's not really a super big deal as long as you have a lightning staff on the back. Now, all of the pieces are divines with magic except for the helm. I use 5 on 1, 5 light, 1 medium, 1 heavy, and the way, if you set it up properly, since all of these pieces you would get are found and dropped, you cannot change the like quality, or not quality, the weight class. So both Yorvolds and Olorim, if you got the bodies, they would be light pieces, and that's why you would have to get a heavy helm, or just like a heavy and medium helm and shoulder. So I personally want 1 health to just be a little bit above. If I wanted to drop my health, I would just lower my attributes, and that would be good. So, other things people use instead of Earthgore is the Bogdan's Nightflame Visage, or heavy and medium as usual. I personally like Earthgore a little bit more because it's just, I don't know, I found it more useful. So the difference between that and the 2-piece would be right here on screen. So Earthgore, if you have 1 piece, you have 2% increased healing done, and if you have Bogdan, you get the extra magicka. So basically it depends on how well your sustain is, and yeah, other than that, the 2-piece is just big heals, and yeah, overall it's personal preference. I personally like Earthgore a little bit more, but ultimately up to you. And you can get Earthgore from Bloodroot if you don't have access to the DLC. Bogdan is from Elden Hollow 2, which came out with the base game, so you can get that easily. I think literally anyone can do Elden Hollow 2 these days. So yeah, Earthgore, you get this from veteran Bloodroot. It's a little bit more challenging, but it's not really that difficult. So if you are newer, I would probably recommend sticking to Bogdan. But if you do have any sort of veteran dungeon experience, then Earthgore is the way to go. However, things you could replace if you don't have these sets are Mending. It's always a good set. Depending on if you are in a trial with 2 healers, well, you should be in a trial with 2 healers all the time. 1 healer will be using Yorvolds and Olorim. Well, I think both healers actually use this set nowadays. And then the swappable thing that would be from 1 healer to the other is 1 person uses Yorvold, the other person uses Mending, or Sanctuary, which is a set found in Banished Cells, and that's also another healer one. I personally haven't tested it much, but I heard it was solid. But I personally either use Yorvolds or Mending, and that's just the way it goes. So Mending basically reduces enemies' damage to you or your group, and reduces weapon damage, so it's good. So if I were to swap it out, I would get 5 body pieces. I think I have 5 body pieces. I still have to mess around. It's all in my storage, but this is how I had mine set up recently. But if I had Mending, I think I do have 5 body pieces just sitting there. Then you replace your 5 body with that one. And other ones, this is kind of outdated now, so I wouldn't really recommend it. But if you really don't have Mending, which comes from Ethereum Archive, you can actually plug that trial nowadays. Ethereum Archive is probably the easiest trial, and it came out with Craglorn. So Worm is not a bad choice. It's a bit outdated nowadays, but it's still not bad. Let's see, what other sets do we have here? Spell Power Cure, it's still good if you don't have the Olorim one or Bet Cloud or Cloud Rest clears. Then Spell Power basically does the same thing. However, the difference between the Cloud Rest one and Spell Power here is people have to stand in your circle. However, with this one, the reason why it's best in slot now is because you can hit all 12 people if they sit or they stand in the circle when you cast it. And it also lasts for 42 seconds combined with your rolls, or 30 seconds combined with mending, or whatever else you use. So it basically does the same thing as Spell Power Cure, except it hits everyone in the group, and it lasts for 42 seconds or 30 seconds. Whereas this one is you only trigger Spell Power Cure while people are at full health, and is a 50% chance to give them Major Courage for 14 seconds. So basically, this one is flat out better by double, or like a lot more if you have it. So that's why people are moving away from Spell Power Cure these days. However, Spell Power Cure is a little bit easier to get. And I mean, Cloud Rest on normal is not difficult. However, getting the jewelry is a little bit more challenging. You'd have to do +2 to get blue jewelry from Cloud Rest, and +3 to get purple jewelry on normal, and then to get gold jewelry you have to do it on Bet +3, which is actually pretty difficult for most groups nowadays. Even some of the top end raid guilds can still struggle with it. But yeah, Spell Power is a beginner set. Well, it's not bad, it does the same thing, it's just not as powerful or effective. So beginner set, so is Worm. And yeah, what else do we have? That's really it for the most part. The Olorim ones, if you do have the body pieces, it's solid to use. But I personally, since I had the Resto staff, then I used that one. Alright, so we've been rambling on enough about the gear right now. Let's go with our champion points. Now keep in mind, I change up my champion points a lot based on what I'm doing. So like, let's say Cloud Rest, for example, you don't need points into Hardy, whereas if you're doing Sanctum Ophidia, you do want more points into Hardy. So basically the red tree is switched out based on what I'm doing at the time. So we'll go over that last because that one's just a changeable one. Everything else here is kind of just how you play. So I have 44 into Warlord. Breaking free from a lot of things is pretty important. Before, I would have more into like bashing or sprinter. However, with what I'm doing right now, Warlord is the way to go. But I do think bashing and or sprinter are both very solid choices to put 44 in. And it's up to you. 75 into Arcanist, 75 into Tenacity, just to get it up to 14%. And the difference between 75 and 100 points is 1%, so we keep it at 75 because that is the best usage for your champion points. Getting it to 100 would be 15%. It's not really worth, so you could use those points elsewhere. I personally have 10 into Tumbling, 46 into Shadow Ward. What you could do if they didn't actually change the breakpoints is set it up to like this. Well, actually, it doesn't fit that way, so never mind. I thought I had something. But anyway, oh, uh-oh. Alright, so fix that one. That's how I have my green tree set up. For healer, I personally have 75 into Blessed because going to 100 is not really worth. I also have 73 into Elfborn because increases your critical damage and your critical healing. So basically when you crit, you heal higher, and it works for damage as well. 37 into Elemental Expert because we do have a shock damage and lightning in the back, and it's just extra damage along with cell penetration. 9 into Staff Expert, 18 into Master at Arms. You don't really need these too much as a healer. You don't really do too much of this. And 23 into Thaumaturge. Before we'd have Exploiter, but a lot of people still do use 75 into Exploiter, so you don't really need it. And your damage is kind of irrelevant. So if you were to put 75 into here, it would only be for the passive. But a lot of people these days are switching to double Inferno. So the Exploiter is less relevant. And that's how I set up my CP. But if you want to still use 75 into Thaumaturge with the Lightning Staff, that is also fine. Staff Expert and Master at Arms kind of irrelevant. As a healer, your main goal is to keep people alive, not do damage. And so with all of these, so this is just what works for me. And let's go into the red tree. The way I have mine set up right now is just for like general use. It's not for any specific trial. So 49 to Hardy, 49 Elemental Defender, 48 Thick Skinned. You could add more into Thick Skinned if you wanted to. 81 Ironclad, 23 Spell Shield, and nothing else here. So once again, based on what you're doing, you will change your champion points. I personally found that you could take points out of Spell Shield and put it into whatever here you wanted if you needed it. But that's how I have my champion points set up. Oh god, I thought my game froze for a second. So let's get into skills. If you've watched my other healer videos from the previous patches, really nothing has changed. There are some swappable skills. I will mention them. But yeah, let's go over everything. Just in case you are new, I'm pretty sure these are pretty standard. I've been using these skills for the past, I don't know, 2 years, maybe more. So, Breath of Life, I'm sure we all know what this is. It's your big heal, emergency heal. It's not a spammable, but what you do is, like, let's say your tank drops down to like 10% health from 100. You spam Breath of Life for him. But usually you don't. This is not your spammable. It's for like emergencies only. Your main spammable would be the Healing Springs, and that is under the Restoration Staff line. And the reason why you would do that is mostly because it just tick heals and huge AoE, and it doesn't cost that much. So Combat Prayer is up next. It buffs your allies or your group with Minor Berserk, Resolve, and Ward. So basically heals them, buffs them, gives them spell resist and more damage done for 11.5 seconds. So once again, with your Volds, a very powerful set. Your minor and major buffs get increased time on it. So with this one, it increases the time, so that's good. And yeah, so you don't really spam Combat Prayer, as it is sort of an expensive skill, but you do cast it more regularly. So I don't know how to put this. Healers don't have a specific rotation like DPS do. Healing Springs is your main spammable. This is like in between. You do more Combat Prayers than you would Breath of Lives, but less than Healing Springs, if that makes sense. Then we have Channeled Focus. The reason why we use Channeled Focus is because it helps buff your, or sets down the circle for your Olareams, but when you're in combat. Inner Light, this one could be replaced with Mutagen or Rapid Regen. I personally don't use it that often, only in very specific cases. You could switch it out, Mutagen, and it just heals 2 people. But personally, I don't see much of a use of it unless you're in like dungeons. For trials, it's kind of irrelevant. All right, so back bar. Here's our lightning staff. Oh yeah, and we have Meteor main bar and Warhorn back bar. We use Meteor because we get the extra passes, magic, and recovery from having it slotted. We don't use it. We use Warhorn 100%. Back bar, we have the Adric Spear, Illuminous Shards. That's pretty standard. I mean, it just gives resources back to people. Next we have Blockade under the Destro line. This one is kind of switchable. I've seen people swap out Blockade for Crushing Shock, and it's very situational, but Crushing Shock to interrupt. But I think most of the time, most people use Blockade anyway. So whatever. You can also switch it out with Power of Delight. And for people who play Stamina, you just send them the debuff the enemies. Orbs on your back bar just give resources. Once again, I've seen people like not use it, but I still think it's very useful, so I'm still gonna keep that on my back bar. Ritual of Retribution. If I had a lightning staff of Olorim, then this also procs your 5-piece, and of course Elemental Drain, because Elemental Drain is good and you should keep that up 100% during fights. So Warhorn, of course. So let me show you how this isn't a rotation, but how the Olorim set actually activates. So when you're in combat with a target dummy, if you place down a heal, you'll see a circle right there. That circle is when people stand in it, you get a buff. And this is where the hold on, let me see. Can you see it? The 42 seconds would apply as long as you are standing in it. And when you see a healer cast this, stand in the circle, you get like a long buff for that. It's good to have. So basically, if you stand in the circle, it's good. And for a healer, if you are using this as well, you can actually sort of place the circle where you are. So if you use the channeled focus, the circle is going to be on you. However, if you use a healing spring, so let's say I'm back here while I'm in combat, and if I place a healing springs down, I could set where the circle goes. So basically, you want to, as a healer, position where your circle will be, where all the DPS are, and it's pretty important to properly place it, because if you, like, let's say everyone is on the boss, stacking behind the boss, and if you cast a heal like someone randomly out there, that effect is useless. So you want to make sure to properly place the circle on the DPS and make sure your timing is right a little bit and place it on there. Whereas if you used a channeled focus or something, this will be placed on you. So healing springs is your ability that you'll be used to set where the circle is, where all the DPS is, so they don't have to run for it. And yeah, you just toss everything out. Orbs. There's no really set rotation for a healer. It's all situational. But the only thing you really have to make sure of is every 10 seconds, know where to place the circle. So overall, that's been pretty much it. In terms of food, I think we covered that. We use Witch Mothers and citrus food. Pots, spell power pots. This is pretty standard. I think everyone knows this already. I could show you how to craft it real quick. I actually do need more as well. So in case you don't know how to craft it with alchemy, you'd be taking your highest level, then ingredients. You would use cornflower, lady smock, and water hyacinth. And this is the combination to give you all your abilities. So this is when you craft it, you make the spell power potions. And in terms of citrus fillet foods, you have to get the recipe. You do it by getting the clockwork quest, and you get it somewhere. So what you do is, the hardest thing to get is probably the perfect row. It's not because it's hard, it's because you have to go fish for it, and fishing in this game is probably one of the most boring things you do, and the only reason people do it is to get the achievements. So yeah, so all of these, very easy to get, except a perfect row. You might have to just buy it from other people. But once you get the food, it is actually best in slot over the Witch Mothers. However, it is also like 3,000 gold compared to 50 gold. So whichever one you can afford more, get that one. But Clockwork is technically best in slot. So I think we have covered everything in terms of gear. Once again, what I mentioned, the Superstar add-on. If you want to take a look at everything I just said, take a screenshot. Go ahead. There you can see all my champion points, the gear, traits, glyphs on it. Red means heavy, green means medium, blue means light. Attributes, penetration, all that stuff. Mundus stone, and all that stuff. So, In terms of your resto staff, you want to have powered because you're a healer. Powered is best in slot. What you could change this out for is either Earthgore or Bogdan. 5p set for your Volge. You either change it for Mending, depending on what you're using, or Sanctuary. And Olorium is best in slot, but you either want that or Spell Power here if you don't have it. But you should probably go for this one. In terms of traits, Arcane is probably still best, but I've also seen people use Infused, so still testing it. Also pretty expensive to test, so I'm waiting. Arcane is good enough right now. And yeah, so hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have any questions or you have a different build, definitely leave it in the comments because I am interested in hearing what people do otherwise. But in terms of clears, you can definitely do every hard mode trial with this setup. So personally, what I have changed that some of you guys that may be better are you could have less health. I think staying above 17,000 health is where you want to be, but as a healer, if you die, it's usually a group wipe, so I like to play it a little bit safer. Staying above 19,000, I could probably take out like 2 or 3 points to stay above and still be fine, but ultimately it's up to you what you want to do. Yeah, this is how I set mine up. I don't have gold jewelry yet because it's stupid expensive to upgrade it at the moment, but maybe in the future it'll be easier. So, hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks so much, and I'll see you guys later.